Political economy. I believe we know what an authority figure or venerable institution is. It is a person or institution with perceived legitimacy in determining something, be it scientific research, the law, history, English literature, mathematics, auto repair, whatever. Now, when one thinks of authorities and subjects in the abstract, he thinks of people who have earned their authority through rigidly comporting to the demands of the market, which is to say that their advice has proven to be sound according to the subjective valuations of those whom they have provided advice. The authority they gain is their payment for giving good advice. Unlike financial economics, this cannot be discretely modeled, but it can be understood in the same way as financial economics. If a person has proven to be an excellent steward of resources according to the subjective valuations of society, he will acquire ownership of more resources, or he will acquire the ability to get the ownership of more resources through profit and more banks willing to give him a line of credit because he has proven the ability to pay back loans. But he will more likely acquire ownership of more resources. And this accuracy is a result of exchanges being agreed upon by both parties, the buyer seeking out the best deal and the seller trying to exchange the most he can while taking into account his competition. If the producer sells a television for $20 and the buyer values the television at $40, that is, the television is worth to the buyer as much as a theoretical basket of goods of all things produced in the market accessible to the buyer that can be exchanged for $40, then the buyer has $20 of consumer surplus. He values the TV at $40, buys it at $20, so the buyer gains $20 in consumer surplus. Another buyer may only value that same television at $23, and so his consumer surplus will be $3. Obviously, most buyers don't explicitly think in these terms, but that's what they're doing. Right? I mean, they don't go, I value that hamburger at $10, but they're selling it for $5, so I'll buy it. Right? They don't think explicitly in those terms. They think, hamburgers, $5. That's a good deal, I'll buy it. Right? That's what we have. Okay. If the producer can build televisions for $17 each and sells them for $20, he is taking material that society values at $17 and producing something that some members of society consistently value at more than $20. Producers earn profits on a free market for three reasons necessarily. 1. Uncertainty. In a theoretical market with perfect competition and perfect information and no geographic micro-monopolisms, there would be no profits. When a producer produces 10,000 televisions and ships them to all of his stores, he doesn't know if they will all sell. In fact, it is unlikely that they will all sell, and so the producer needs some margin. But because producers compete, if one producer gives himself too much margin, he will lose customers, right? Because he will raise the price of his television too much to give him that margin, but then people won't buy his stuff. It's like a game of chicken, each producer driving their margin to as low a level as they can tolerate. If a producer drives too low, then he will lose money because his margin wasn't enough to deal with the unsold televisions. If he drives his profit margin too high, less people will be willing to buy the television, and so he won't be able to sell, and so he'll have just a bunch of televisions that he spent money on, right? And he'll lose money that way. The second reason producers earn profits on a free market is from micro-monopolizations. Now, this is not absolute, but it is a trend. If Walmart sells a TV for $23 and Kmart sells the same TV for $20, it's not like Walmart will sell 0 televisions and lose 100% of their customers to Kmart, assuming it's the same TV. Some customers will lack knowledge that Kmart sells the same TV for less, or will know but prefer to pay $3 extra because Walmart is closer, or there's something about Walmart otherwise. Also, the closest Walmart to you may not have a monopoly on the goods it sells to you, but it has a monopoly on selling those goods on the land it has acquired. and all firms can charge a premium for this convenience. This is why, as long as there is land and traveling costs, profits will never completely go away. They will and do get very small, but they don't go away completely. The third reason that there are producers earn profits on a free market is that the market is not saturated. As an industry is around longer, more competitors come online and competition becomes more intense until there is no more economic profit. And accounting profit is very small. There will continue to be accounting profit, but there will not be economic profit, because economic profit is accounting profit minus opportunity cost. Opportunity cost in this case being what the firms could have earned in somewhere else. The completely saturated market is an abstraction, as there are always changes in society. Right, the population may grow or shrink, changing the demand for food and for what types of food. And while the television set industry may be relatively saturated overall, the LCD 30-inch flat-screen television set industry may be wide open with few producers and thus high profits on that television in particular. Right? The soda industry may be saturated overall, but the triple-calorie avocado bacon bubblegum flavored fizzless soda industry is probably wide open if you can find the one guy who wants that. By guiding the structure of production, the capitalist acquires stewardship of more and more resources from profits, or is punished by society for mismanaging them with losses. Similarly, persons acquire authority by providing good service, or lose authority by providing bad service. If a person's authority is presupposed, then their advice will be taken seriously without them having been proven in the past. And there's no reason that this person's advice will be better than that of any other person. An example of this is when a priest is sought for psychological advice, or any state official is sought for economic advice. The state official may be trained to deal with crime or uphold the law or to teach mathematics, but to the extent that the state official is not behaving exactly as he would behave on a free market and is not being punished by losses to that extent, is the extent to which his authority is presupposed. A person doesn't become a math teacher for a living because he has proven capable at teaching math through others purchasing his services, but because he took the classes prescribed by the state. It is presupposed that because he took those classes and the state certified him, he is now a math teacher. Now, central planning is not completely useless, and as a result of taking those classes, the teacher probably knows a thing or two about math more than the average Joe, quite a bit, in fact, especially in something like mathematics, which is something simple, right? There's not a whole lot of vagaries with that, at least as far as students are concerned. Students taking math are concerned. Maybe amongst the matherati, there are some vagaries and debates, but as far as students taking Algebra 2, it's pretty cut and dry. And so it's more difficult for the state to screw something like that up than it is for them to screw something up like history. Anyway, to make an analogy, it would be like the state's prescribing what one must know to make shoes, and then guaranteeing an income to the people who meet this criteria and ration out the shoes this person produces, right? Switch out shoes with teaching services, and that is exactly what the state does with education. It's not a market test, it's a web of presupposed authorities. Now, before going any further, let me state that the democratic state is just a state. Let me state that the democratic state is just a state. Its justification is different from a non-democratic state, but between elections, it is functionally the same, aside from different incentives for elected officials, which only matter to the extent that the public even knows what's going on. Elections introduce a whole new world of political economy, but I'm going to ignore that for now. The state is a presupposed authority. That is, when a state official proclaims, "We shall decide who can own guns and of what type and how many, the state official is viewed as having the authority to make that rule. If a person disobeys that rule, his actions will be seen as unjust to the extent that the population views the state authority to make that rule just. If a regular person proclaimed that he would decide, he gets on the top of the hill and says he will decide who can own what and how many guns, that he is the state, that person would be seen as a crazy person. Right? To the extent that a normal person behaving like a state seems bizarre, is the extent to which the presupposed authority of the state has resulted in perversions in society. Let me stipulate that, aside from limited space or extreme scarcity monopolies and cartels cannot form on a free market. Cartels are broken by competitors, and if the cartel decides to go to war with their competitors, they will not only be facing the logistical problem of finding and shutting down all competitors, but will face boycott and war from the general populations. States cannot maintain themselves by force alone, nor can firms. Even when the U.S. Army props up puppet states in Iraq and Afghanistan, mostly by force, that is dependent on a giant well of ideological support back in the homeland. Right. If a population presupposes the legitimacy of a state, that state can impose rents, taxes, and rules somewhat arbitrarily. Some states are perceived with more authority than others. For example, Germans tend to project more authority onto their state than Americans or Australians. But they all have some capacity for arbitrariness that comes from being a presupposed authority, not having to earn their authority by satisfying customers, but just by being the state. Firms can earn greater profits by cartelizing, and if they can lobby the state to proclaim their cartel, that can be seen as legitimate by the population. In Britain, this was done rather baldly. The king would issue grants of monopoly privilege, explicitly proclaiming that anyone competing with the monopolist would face a fine and or physical force. In exchange, the monopolist would pay a portion of the resulting profits back to the king. That state could be so brazen because the population was stupid and believed in the divine right of the king. But this is the basic model of rent-seeking. The firm buys off the state, and the state enforces the monopoly. The state is necessary because the state is a presupposed authority, while the firm is not. But the firm is also necessary because the firm can actually produce wealth, while the state, being necessarily disconnected from profits and loss, is like a blind man. And the extent of the disconnect is the extent of the blindness. Though even cartels do respond to consumer demand, just not as much as free market firms. Big business and big government have a symbiotic relationship, and this is the inevitable outgrowth of industrialization in a statist society. I like the term rent-seeking, but it is also called corporatism, fascism, or corporate fascism. I do not like the term corporatism because corporations were originally a means by which the lower classes could invest. They bought stock in a large venture. For example, a ship to India carrying spices may cost $1,000 in 1800, but a single person could invest $1 in the voyage and receive 1/1000th of the revenue in return, if there was any. Corporations broke the labor-capitalist dichotomy and allowed everyone to be some of both, labor and capitalist, leading to a middle class. I often talk in terms of the capitalist planning the structure of production as if the capitalist is distinct from the laborer, but this is rarely true. There are only a few people who are good enough to be capitalists for a living. Most can only afford to do it in conjunction with their direct labor. And this is not surprising, as a single planner can manage the labor of multiple people, not the other way around. And so a free market results in an emergent and graduated hierarchy. However, if someone who has little capital reveals himself as an excellent steward of capital, banks will loan this person money to the extent that the bank is a profit-maximizing firm. It is through savings that investing can occur, And if there is a lot of money waiting to be invested, then it will be easy to start a new firm. So a high savings rate creates a truly egalitarian society in regards to opportunity, right? Though definitely not in regards to outcome. Anyway, fascism causes perversions in the market. Because cartels are monopolistic, they produce shoddy products at high prices, though it's not black and white. Right? It's not like one day McDonald's is competing on a free market, and the next day they, Burger King, Wendy's, and Carl's Jr. / Hardee's, all form a cartel, and it becomes impossible to compete. Because the population in the U.S. would not stand for explicit grants of monopoly or cartel privilege, it has to be more insidious. And so we get licenses, reviews, fees, inspections, forms, slowly creating a web of difficulty, making it more difficult to compete. And so it's not like a black and white cartel versus free market. It's more of a cartelistic market. And the cartelistic market is created through, quote, regulation, close quote, which I have covered early in this booklet. What is insidious about the cartelistic market is that on the surface it looks like a free market. So less subtle minds will assume that they live in a market economy and will consider the prices, the services, and the profits they see as being inherent to a free market. They will blame the decline in real wages that has occurred since the 1970s on the free market, and they will conflate the darkly comedic medical insurance and medical service industries with the free market. And because they view the problems of the cartelized market as being problems of the free market, the population will clamor for more, quote, regulation, close quote, of the free market run wild. Now, I would have to make a case-by-case analysis, but price controls on a state-sanctioned monopoly may be justified if we are to assume that the state will not shrink significantly anytime soon. Once we enter the realm of the cartelized markets, things get kind of funky. But the problems of the cartelized market result in a clamor for more, quote, regulation, close quote, leading to more barriers to entry, which leads to more cartelization, which leads to an even worse market. Today, the U.S. economy looks like a medieval guild and monopoly system, though it is not a result of overt proclamation, but of creeping rounds of regulation. This cartelization allows for various abuses, which cause a boycott response from society, as stated earlier, the boycott response. Unfortunately, because the economy is cartelized, boycotts are ineffective. Because of state intervention, you have not only an artificially large boycott response to artificially high levels of abuse, but this boycott is ineffective. It's ineffective because profit margins are so high, leading to an artificially high war response instead. This war response manifests in anti-capitalism. However, because the state is seen as legitimate, the corporations have at their disposal the guns of the state to protect them from the war response. And so the corporations don't have to fight their own battles caused by their own abuses. The anti-capitalists who realize this call themselves anarchists, and their slogan is, "Smash the state, smash capitalism." These anarchists have nothing to do with the free market, and why pro-freedom folks call themselves market anarchists is beyond me. While the rounds of regulation inflate corporate profits more and more, they also result in more of the population questioning the market economy in general, and you get the rise of the total state. That is direct state management of the means of production, or often called socialization or nationalization. Though, because all state programs are necessarily disconnected from society-decided prices, it is the opposite of social. The rise of the total state is a return to barbarism. It is antisocial decivilization. It is a return to the time when the structure of production was so undeveloped that barbarian armies could match and often defeat sedentary society armies. Sedentary societies being based not on force, but on explicit law and mutually beneficial exchanges and charities. The annihilation of the rent-seeking corporations is welcome. They made a deal with the devil, the state, and socialization, often called nationalization in more parochial societies, of the firm is a well-deserved death. And the population, which now either has to live with the total state or go through a bloody revolution, deserves their fate as well, for the most part. The only people who don't deserve their fate are the foresighted people, the elect, who see the state for what it is, oppose it, and advocate a system of emergent law and ad hocratic property. I am not talking about constitutionalists or minarchists, right? Those house slaves who deserve the total state. The people I'm talking about call themselves market anarchist or anarcho-capitalist, and as much as I dislike them generally, a few people who call themselves mutualists and left-libertarians, a few would also be part of the elect, I'd say. Though one need not advocate emergent law and property, as that is the natural outgrowth when there is no presupposed authority. And law and property will be emergent to the extent that there is no presupposed authority.